if let's go to the randomized trials one just for demonstration purposes here.
Which one?
The RCTs, risk-bias RCTs. So you see here, what we have is one of the questions about random sequence generation and so on. So one of the things that it allows you to do, I don't want to do it now, but a lot of these, as you know, a lot of these instruments, the Robbins Eye or the Cochrane risk-bias tool, et cetera, you want to probably use them across projects. So and multiple projects use them. So we've inbuilt the risk-bias tools into the system, and that's how these were generated here. I'm not going to spend time showing you how to do that, but I just wanted to inform you that is an option in the system for you to pull in existing risk-bias tools and build your data extraction form from them. And then once you pull it in, you can make modifications, of course. But the pre-existing ones, including their skip patterns. So one of the things with the new Cochrane risk-bias tool, and one of the things that's also true with the Robbins Eye tool, is that there's a lot of skip patterns in the tool. So for example, I think if 1A is yes or probably yes, then you skip to 1C, for example, and you don't answer 1B. So the system also allows the data extractor to automatically be taken to 1C in that scenario, if they chose yes or probably yes to 1A. I'm just using that as an example. So these skip patterns are automatically built in. I'm going to pause there. I realize I'm going a little fast, but I just want to make sure that I leave time for any questions that also have come up.
No, from my perspective, I'm just wanting to make sure I understand which pieces of maybe some of the things you're talking about might need to be done from our end before uploading data from Distiller. So, any of the key questions set up or things like that, how much of those pieces of what you're demonstrating here would need to be done before we do any sort of upload.
Right. So we'll get to that. Was that Tracy?
Yeah, sorry, that was
Tracy. We'll get to that in a little bit. I just wanted to quickly demo the system first.
Yeah, no.
Sure. So let's now quickly go to the data extraction. So I guess if we click on go to extractions. So let's say if you're done completing the form, building the form, and you now get into data extraction. So this is sort of a dashboard that you can see here for data extraction. I think we are in the 50s at the moment in terms of number of studies completed. You can see the citation information, who it's been assigned to the progress bar for how many of those tabs that I just showed you were completed, and then working and deleting. So you can edit what's being done, or you can delete. Again, we prefer not to delete, but you do have the option, and then it yells at you if you choose to, and then if you choose to override it, it can delete it. So maybe let's quickly click on work for any of these, Jens, and show what it looks like from the data extractor end. So this is what it looks like. Maybe just scroll down a little bit just to show the look of the system for.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly point out that we mentioned earlier that specific questions can be assigned to key questions. And so here would be where you make that selection, which key question you want to be working on. And the system will then filter down the questions so that you don't have to answer the ones or skip over the ones that are not relevant to the key question that you're addressing.
Right, great. Maybe just let's jump straight to the results, because that's not something we did not see on the previous one. So one of the things that the results section is organized into, so you can choose your outcome as a data extractor, assuming you've entered a list of outcomes in the outcomes tab up top. So the list of outcomes that you previously entered show up as a drop-down list here. So let's say you're on the chosen outcome of capsular contracture, which is one of the outcomes of interest for this breast reconstruction project. So the data that you extract get organized into 4 tabs. So this is a single group study. That's why you just have one group. We were interested in measuring harms even in single group studies. So we just have, there's no comparison. So there's no between arm comparisons, but there's only descriptive stats for this one group. There's 1860 patients analyzed, and then you have a percentage and then events, etc. But if you had an odds ratio, you would enter them on the right, or you can change odds ratios to relative risk and so on. And then within arm comparisons at the bottom in green. So let's say there's a comparison between 6 months and baseline. And then if there's a net comparison of a comparison of 2 different changes in the 2 groups. So that would be in the net comparisons quadrant. And then you would edit measures and select which measures you want to enter for each of these quadrants. I think that's it in terms of SRDR Plus. I think in the interest of time, just to make sure we have enough time for your questions and for the open time for questions and so on, is I'll skip over SR 360, and if we have time at the end, I could come back to them. So that's a brief demo about SRDR Plus. There's a lot I didn't show, of course. Now let's come to the questions that Tracy sent us ahead of time. So Jens and I will sort of tag team our way through this and try and addressing your questions. So the first question that was asked, I think, Tracy, if I'm paraphrasing, was that when you're using distiller SR, so when you're exporting out of distiller SR, and you use distiller SR for screening as well. So you're in distiller, you have all these citations that include both studies that are included as well as studies that are excluded. So the question was asked whether when importing references as a RIS file from distiller into SRDR Plus, whether you need to import all those references. The answer is no. It's okay to import only. In fact, we encourage you, if you're not using SRDR Plus for screening, to encourage you to import just the citations that point to the studies that are included in the review. So the answer to the question of whether that's okay, the answer is yes. Was there a follow-up question about that?
No, I think that sums up exactly. We just wanted to be sure we were complying with what we were expected. So Thank you for that. So
the data sharing through SRDR Plus is for the sharing of the included studies, not the decisions about screening and so on.
Hi. This is Erin.
Yes.
The first question, I'm the one that submitted the questions, but I wanted to clarify too, I went through the tutorials, and I just wanted to clarify too that the instructions on the tutorials just are, I think that's what it was asking for, but I just wanted to clarify that we have to set up a filter in order to only select the included study. So just an extra step that people want to know. If they're doing all of their screening, they'll have to kind of figure out how to only include the included studies in that RAS file. So.
Right, and thank you, Erin, for that. I neglected to mention that, yeah, we'll be adding that to the tutorial as well. That's a great point. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I guess this is Tracy again, sorry. Erin, maybe you can answer this too. But when we have a study that is the main results or the main publication for a study, there are often those ancillary articles. Would you guys want us to be uploading the citations for all of the associated references for a certain study or just the main study?
So if we were using, I know that in our projects when we use the SRDR for data extraction, not just for the uploading, but there's a place where you can put associated citations in there. But given that you're uploading the data after the fact, we wouldn't need you to put that in there, because as long as the main citation is in there and that's the one that's referenced, or at least that's one of the ones that's referenced in the report, someone who's accessing the data is also seeing the report, so they'll be able to know what the other citations were that were linked to the main citation that is being cited in SRDR.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So the second question and the third question were related. So the question that was asked was related to in Distiller SR, and when you're exporting the data out of Distiller SR, the study population, the intervention group, and the comparator group information are all part of one, I guess, tab or file, I guess, that contains information also about the results. So that's the I forget what the name of that tab is, but these three pieces of information are in one file and in one section. So, and then similarly, all the results for all outcomes combined together, or maybe not combined together, but all the outcomes that are in the project are in one file. And that's imported into the results. So, and the question was whether this was okay. The answer is yes, but, and the reason we say that is because there's sort of a trade-off here between needing you to do a lot of work after the fact, which we are trying to minimize, versus the purpose of sharing the data through SRDR+. The purpose, at least the stated purpose of why we are trying to push for these data to come into SRDR+ and share through there is because the system has been set up so that someone who is trying to access the data is able to do it in a computable way. And by that, we mean is able to link the information from a given arm to a given outcome and a given result for those outcomes. Uploading that information as one file helps with sharing, but it doesn't help with that aspect of sharing, of being able to get at which arm results pertain to which arm and which study population and which study population subgroup and so on. Which is why in an ideal world, we would like for that information to be separated. So maybe for future projects, we would encourage for that information to be separated. But for this particular project, for example, it's fine. We've also checked in with Lionel and Stephanie at AHRQ, and they said, let's try and get the data out, but let's try for future projects to have those pieces of information be separated. And that sort of bleeds into my answer for question number 3 as well. The question there was whether it's okay to group studies under multiple key questions together. We understand that this practically sometimes needs to be done because a given study may address multiple key questions and so on. So there are practical reasons why those studies are sort of kept together, even though they are addressing multiple questions. But if at all feasible for going forward, if we can try and minimize that would be great. But for the purpose of this sharing for this project, that would suit the needs. But let's try and minimize that going forward to the extent that we can. I don't know if Jens wanted to add anything to what I've said so far about these two questions.
I think you've hit all the points. Maybe just to put it in different words. So the ultimate goal, of course, of SRDR Plus is data sharing, right, and data reusability. And to that end, we can only reuse data that is meaningful in the way that the system understands it. So while it's always possible to share, information electronically by just uploading things to a computer that can be, then re-downloaded by another team, that information itself is not computable, right? A computer cannot understand what these blobs of information are unless we give meaning to them. So it's one of those cases where the more you put in, the more you get out. And so what we're trying to get teams to sort of understand and get behind is the idea that if we put in a little bit more effort ahead of time, then hopefully we can reap the benefits of it later on. So when you go back and you want to update projects, or you go back and you want to extend and reuse the data that you've uploaded before, then you will benefit much more from having properly separated information in our system. You can search through it better, you can reuse it better, and you'll benefit later on. So it's more about thinking of your future self in that sense. Like, do you want to do all the separation and all the legwork later, or do you want to do it? You want to put a little bit more effort in now, and then you can reap the benefits for at a later time.
So this is Elizabeth. So our typical file structure, we have one table
I'm sorry, you're cutting, like your volume went super low.
How about this? Is this better?
Yeah.
So our typical file structure, well, we have one table that's one record per study, and then we have another table that's one record per intervention group, and we link them, by a little IG code, an intervention group code. And then for each intervention group, we have a comparator, in that same, so that the intervention group row shows the intervention group and the comparator. So for that first item of the study population, intervention group and comparator, those are internally filed as two separate tables. So, and with a little like ref ID that links them to the intervention group to the study population. So would it be better for us to import like those two tables separately? I'm not really sure what section files are, honestly, and if if we have options to do multiple files or single files or what.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like you're collecting information in separate tables that are then referenced via IDs, right? So that you know that they belong together. That is actually similar to how we do it in SRDR. We do, of course, the ID tracking is done internally, but on the surface, what your tables I think correspond to our sections, right? So I heard a little piece there which kind of confused me. Where I think when it came to the comparators. So for us, when we speak of comparators, they're only relevant in the results section, and so to us, the results section is kind of what one of your tables would be, right? And technically they could be broken down into 4 different tables. One table for being just the general descriptive statistics, one table for being between on comparisons, then within on comparisons, and then what we call net comparisons. What I've discovered from working with teams and trying to export data, it is not possible to map one-to-one between on comparison and net comparisons because the number of rows in the export will not match. So we are forced to separate those into different tables, and I think that should be the case for you as well if I'm understanding your table set up correctly. Then so in those cases it is advisable to keep them separate, yes, and then to upload them separately, and we will provide mechanisms so that you can map your individual results table, so whatever your within on comparison information is, into the appropriate quadrant. So we call them quadrants, right? And we color code them to separate them visually. But what your within on comparison tables would map to would be the green area here within on comparison in our results section, and what your between on comparisons table would map into would be the blue area in this section here.
Yeah. Could you actually could you go back to the questions view? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So the question is about uploading section files, and so my understanding is by the section files that means you need information about the study population, the intervention group, comparator group, and then results. So there are sort of 4 pieces there of the section when you.
That's correct. Yeah, there are 4 pieces. Okay. That would be the ideal case that Ian was describing. In an ideal case, you separate those 4 components out so that our system can give meaning to all the information that you give. If you lump them all into one section, we can record it, right? We can capture the data, but the system cannot put much meaning. Like it's not terribly meaningful to the system because it is just it no longer.
Right, yeah. So the only difference that we have, the only thing that we're not really able to do is that we don't have a separate comparator group. Our comparators are always, so our structure is, we have, one record per study, and then those mapped one-to-many studies to intervention groups. And then each intervention group has an associated comparator group. But then the data is in a separate table. So we have, the information about the intervention groups and comparators in one table, and then we put the results in a separate table.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? But
okay.
your results table must have some sort of column with the reference information, right? Otherwise, we don't know what. Yeah, that's perfect. That's good, because that will then link the information from the results table to the study information and the intervention group and so on. And that's exactly what our results table does. Our results table links the intervention groups with the outcomes and the study.
Okay, so it sounds like for our purposes, what we would shoot for is actually to be uploading probably 3 files. One file is the study population, and then put it separately at this other level with the intervention and comparator information, and then third, all our outcome data.
Yep.
Instead of lumping the intervention group stuff with the population, it sounds like you'd rather we separate those into separate files, which is easier.
That's correct.
Easy for us to do since we have them separately. Okay. Got it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is Erin. Yes, this was more of, not that we weren't able to, but more of a time feasibility question. Like, we can download everything at once, or do we spend, and that's another question I was curious about, how much, time up front of, like, it's already been abstracted in Distiller. It looks relatively similar to the way, SRDR Plus is set up when you're actually in the forms, but obviously it spits out this pretty ridiculous looking CSV file. And so these are more getting at the chance of, like, how much time do we spend kind of separating these out, which obviously maybe more time investment in that.
It's a balancing act, right? Like I said, for us, we would always like to push towards more separation, more granular identifying of information. But of course, we do not expect you to go back and redo everything one thing at a time. So it's one of those, what's the term, like 80-20, like don't go the whole 100%, just put 80% of the effort as much as you can, and then we'll get,
No, this is helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Mira. All right, so then let's move on to questions 4 and 5. So question 4, I think, should take us, can do this pretty quickly. So question 4, I think I showed you the roles of members and roles. I think there was clarification about where do the authors of the report go. So as I said, members and roles are really for roles of people who are using the system to extract data. The authors would go in this field in the project information tab. So where you put this other information, such as the Prospero ID and the type of review and so on, there's a field for authors. You just list them out as you do on the first page of the, or whatever page on the report, the second or the third page of the report. So that's about members and roles clarification and where do authors go. There was a question asked about draft versus complete status and publications. So one of the things that I think you were asking about was which option on the page allows you to make the project public. We're still working on that yet. So it's not that you haven't found it. We are finalizing our mechanism for making the project data public. It's not the status of a given article. So the status that is listed out for a given article, so maybe even Jens navigates to, so if you go to extractions list, so the status that's on this page just lists out for the data extracting lead to see how much is done on each of the studies and which ones have a lot of work still left to be done. And that green gets populated. If you click on work on any one of them, the green gets populated. Or I guess if you click on work, if you hover over the ones that are not completed, it tells you what all are not yet done for a given study. And if you click on work for any one of them, the status, the green button that says results completed indicates that the results is completed. So clearly one of these is not quite completed, as if it wasn't quite, if the overall wasn't marked as such. So clearly they forgot to mark the arms as completed. But this is for internal checking. This is not the publication mechanism. We'll send information about the publication mechanism once that's finalized. And you can just let us know when you're ready with that, and we'll help you.
Okay, so we wouldn't need to go back and complete every. This is just for internal.
That's when you upload, you wouldn't have to go into each study and each extraction to mark it as complete in order to publish. That would not be That would not be necessary.
Yeah, this is for internal practice.
I saw that.
Yeah, that would be a lot of.
Yeah.
All right, so that's actually, let's go back to the agenda and see whether, these are the questions you've sent ahead of time. I just want to make sure that before we get into the demo about importing from Excel, whether you had any other questions about any of this. We do have open time for questions, which towards the end. Okay, so maybe Jens, if you can hurry up the demo exporter.
Yeah, so let me just introduce it a little bit, because so we absolutely understand that your team uses Distiller, and we already have a pipeline for Distiller imports that people have been using successfully, and I hope we answered a lot of your questions in terms of how many different section files we would prefer you to upload versus what's feasible. But what we are building now is this preparation tool. So there are many teams that don't use structured applications like Distiller or SRDR, and instead they just extract information into like an Excel table freehand, basically. Or sometimes I've even seen teams use like Word documents. So they make a table in Word document and then they will fill in data. So for those teams, the biggest hurdle has always been how to map the information that they have in their Excel sheets to the sections that we have in SRDR, and to give them a list of column headers that they need to have in order to import the data into SRDR is always very troublesome. It means that those teams had to do a lot of massaging of the source Excel files. They had to rename their worksheets. They had to rename column headers, and that was always very problematic. And so what my team has been working on is trying to assist them in doing this by providing a tool, like a web tool, where they can see what the system expects, and then what the system can read from their Excel files, and then try to do a mapping between the two, right? So in this case, we're trying to show you this because as a user group, you can probably give us feedback on what you think, whether or not this would be helpful for people. While we are understand that you're probably not going to use this tool because you have Distiller files, which are already pretty organized and structured. So you don't necessarily need this, but for other people that don't have these structured applications that they use, this might be useful. So what we saw here is when you first load this page, you're presented with a drop zone where you can upload the file, and the file that is expected here is a traditional Excel spreadsheet, right, XLSX, which you then drop into the zone. At that point, the app will then read all the column headers and present them as a vertical list. So on the right-hand side, you see all the column headers that the system read from the Excel file, and these pills that you see here are the sections and the pieces of information that SRDR Plus expects and needs to properly map information into the system. So what we're looking for is now user interaction. We want the user to tell us which of these columns really map to the things that SRDR Plus needs in order to map correctly. And sometimes to facilitate, to help with this, the system will try to guess first, right? We use just Levenstein word distance to try to get a best match. And if it's close enough, we will try to suggest that mapping, but the user is free to overwrite what the system found. So in this case, the ID portions of ref ID and PubMed ID were fairly close. The system thought that this might be a good match, but clearly it is not. So the user can go ahead and put that to the side and say that maybe there's a better match somewhere down the line. So in this case, we would say that, okay, maybe refman and ID is a better match. Author to author was clearly the same, so that's good. Study title, study name is close enough, and it's probably what we meant. The included section is a flag that might not be used in this spreadsheet, so we can put that to the side. So I hope the idea here is to interactively help the user tell us what fields map to the expected fields in SRDR Plus. And so as you can see, this is one of your files. So there's over 140 or so columns, so the list is fairly long. We would try to go through this as quickly as possible. It would probably take just a few minutes to find matches. Here's a publication date which I would guess would match with the year. I would hope like something like this, right? Maybe these match. And again, this is all the user, right? The user can make these determinations, and the user can do this interaction and tell us exactly what they meant with those fields. And if there is no match, just put it to the side. It is not used or needed. So once the user goes through the entire list and sees that okay, everything matches up, or the fields that they can match up, they can leave this section and then move on to the next worksheet. So since the particular file that I used had 2 worksheets, there are 2 tabs, and we would go through the process once again in this tab. The other thing, of course, is that needs to be mapped is which of the sections in SRDR it goes to. So not only the individual fields, but the section that it goes to. So in this case, again, the system decided that children_design details was the closest match to this design details section for us. And so it made this mapping, but the user can once again overwrite that. If this is actually the incorrect section and it should rather go into ARM details, let's say, then he can select that from here. Okay, so what we're looking for is sort of feedback as to the UI and the interaction. Do you feel that there are improvements that we can make? Is it clear what the purpose of the tool is? How the interaction should be done, like the dragging and dropping, is that obvious? Do you think that readability is good? Like what are your thoughts on the overall presentation? I mean, this is fairly new and pretty rough still, but I hope the intent is what we're hoping is clear here, or we're trying to improve on the intent.
This is Erin. This is the first time I've been seeing this. Is the idea that you would upload all of the Excel files for each of the drop-down options all at once, then submit everything at once?
So right now the interface is built to upload one Excel file at a time. So okay. If your Excel file includes all of the sections, then you could technically do everything in one go, in one sweep. But if you have multiple Excel files with multiple sections, then it would require you to go through this process for each Excel file. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, without playing with it, it seems simple enough. But I think, because potentially we do have some projects that we still use access for, and so potentially we may have to use this function in the future if it's a project that is coming from there and not distiller. So obviously not hand entering, because usually those are quite large projects that we've done before that we're bridging from. So having a process to use Excel to upload would be ideal.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so when you record data in your Access database, the preferred export I thought was CSV, but you can also export into Excel.
So we would be able to use, even though it's not from distiller, just export the CSV files and use it the same way as distiller?
We can export either CSV or Excel from Access, either one.
From Access, okay. Yeah.
So we could still just use, I guess we'll be more comfortable with the distiller, quote unquote, distiller import function. So we wouldn't have to use this one necessarily. Okay.
I think if you can bring your Access database to an Excel format and it is then not as structured, because the references would not match up the way that they do in Distiller, then I would think that this import tool is the one to use for those Excel files. But I mean, I think so, because Distiller has its own way of referencing the information across different Excel files, and so that would probably not be present in the Access database exported Excel files. Yeah. Did that make sense, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So once the user has completed the mapping here, they would go ahead and submit the file, in which point what we do is we let the user download a copy of this quote unquote corrected or fixed file, right? So the Excel file that we then download to the user is a representation of what SRDR would consider a quote unquote perfect import file, something that is just ready to be imported into SRDR Plus. And while the end user probably will not use it for this case, it will give them an idea of the structure and the naming conventions that SRDR Plus considers, valid. Like that's the format that we would consider valid. And so for perhaps the next time, somebody exports data in an unstructured way, they can go ahead and use that formatting so that they actually no longer need this preparation tool to upload to SRDR Plus, or the preparation tool will basically match everything up immediately, and there is no need to do any more shuffling and any more, moving the pills into the proper place. And then just for your information, after it's received, the import process is handled in the background job. And then once that's finished, we will notify the user via email that the import is done with an accompanying link. And then they can follow that link and take a look at the data as it is now represented in SRDR Plus. So that
just to clarify, so if we, for example, so we use the field title study name. So if we just use study title, which is your field name, then this process should be basically instantaneous. It'll all be right, and then we would just, okay.
That's exactly what I mean, right. It wouldn't be instantaneous. There would be nothing for you to do. If everything matched up exactly the same, then the system would map one-to-one immediately, and you just have to hit proceed or confirm. That's right.
All right, thank you, Jens. And we got some good feedback, I think, there. So I know we've still got a little bit of time for any other questions about any of this or anything else related to SRDR Plus or SRDR that you think we can answer.
Would it be possible for us to just get those field names? Is there a place where you could send us a link, like where we could just find those, so then we could just proactively use those titles where it makes sense?
Yeah, we can definitely send you a link. A list. We'll probably do that via email. That would probably be the best.
Okay, thanks.
Did we get Lionel on the call? I know that he wanted to participate, and I tried to check the list earlier, but I didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I don't think he's on, but I guess we could share the recording if he's interested.
Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts?
This is Erin. I just wanted to, I know you mentioned earlier, so we have a couple drafts sitting in there. I mean, it's possible we can go back and edit the files now that I know and see how much time that would actually take for future. Do you have like a timeline of when to expect when the publishing, just so I know internally, like what to let my teams know, because they're just sitting in draft right now. So when I need to check back in to see when we should publish.
Right. So I don't have an exact date for you, Erin, but one of our programmers is working on this. Okay. And what I will do, though, I don't imagine it would be more than a couple of weeks or so, but why don't I follow up with you when it's done, but also maybe even before that when I have a more exact timeline for you, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. I just want to let people know or put it on my calendar to check back in.
Sure. And I'll put it on mine as well.
So this is Tracy. I imagine the next time we go into our next project and work on building these files and uploading, we'll have other questions that might come up as we try to gear our processes toward what you guys are needing for SRDR Plus. How do you want us to follow up with you or interact moving forward?
So if it's the odd question here or there, I mean, feel free to email. I don't have the email address of the admin account, but I mean, I'll follow up with you. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is an admin account email that one of our staff, who's the administrator for SRDR, triages these requests, etc. But if you think that's something that we could answer off the fly as well, do email us. But I'll follow up with you, Tracy, with an email address. But if it is more substantive things like some of the questions you had here, or where you think it would benefit from like a call or a quick demo or something, that we could try and arrange that as well. So depending on what your questions are.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Did you guys have any questions regarding the distiller pipeline? because like I said, we already have a distiller pipeline in place. Were there any, I don't know, hiccups that you guys experienced when trying that one? I think there was a question about the RIS file before, which we've already answered, but that tells me that you probably tried it.
This is Erin. I highlighted a couple. We ran into one issue. It was probably me that you were emailing with, and I wasn't sure what the problem was with the file. Basically just I got an error when I was uploading it, and so just troubleshooting what that was.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I imagine if I come up against an error, I'll probably just send another email if I'm not unsure how to fix it. But I can't, to be honest, off the top of my head, I wasn't really sure what was wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean, all of our inboxes are always open, obviously. You can send any one of us an email if you have a question. Yeah, we do have an official, support email. So we'll share that after the meeting again, just as a debrief. And what was I going to say? Oh, so I think somebody mentioned, the next time you work on a project and such, like, of course, we highly encourage you, to capture your data in SRDR Plus directly if possible. I understand that it's always very difficult to change, your workflow from established and existing kind of models like you guys are using Distiller, but it would definitely be easier and it would benefit us very, very much if you use SRDR Plus to extract data proactively rather than retroactively uploading it. I just wanted to put that out there.
Can I ask one question before you go? Just is the SR360 the new name for SRDR 2.0?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is actually correct. Yes. The SR360 is a higher level view, so it's at the report level rather than the individual study level information. And yeah, we renamed it SR360 because SRDR 2.0 was, I mean, not that 360 gives it more meaning, but it was too similar to SRDR, and people thought that they kind of captured the same information, which is not the case. It's a higher level, a report level information.
And we found ourselves spending way too much time explaining the difference between SRDR 2.0 and SRDR Plus. So I thought it was entirely reasonable to call it something else.
Sure. I realized
it's great that you caught that.
Yeah, no, I was curious. I was wanting to cover, but I realized it's already 11. But I would be curious to learn more about what that is, because that's been on the back. I don't think that we necessarily need to use it right now. Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd be curious to know what it is, if it's something we will have to interact with in the future.
Yeah. So I can say a little bit. So it's the same thing as was just brought up. It's as SRDR 2.0 that we had demoed at the June annual meeting. What we've done since then is we've incorporated feedback. We've quote unquote made it publicly available through SRDR Plus. One of the things we're doing right now is inputting some of our recent reports into it so that we can use that as more of here's what it looks like. Here's how you can show, quote unquote, the world a more packaged information from your report. So once we've completed that, I'd be happy to shut up. If you're interested, maybe spend a little bit of time with any of y'all who are interested in that to show what it looks like and what it looks like with a completed report and so on.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch. So I think Tracy can probably that's, I imagine, going to be rolling out maybe sometime this year? Or
yeah.
Is that, okay.
Should be a few weeks now. Just this week I was meeting with our administrator who's spending a lot of time inputting a couple of our reports into it, and it'd be close to having those two at least ready. Yeah.
Oh.
Other thoughts or questions? Doesn't sound like it. So at least from our end, thank you all for your attention with this. And we realize that it takes a little bit of work to get it right, even from a user end. So Thanks for your patience with it as well. And do let us know if other questions come up as you're doing this. But we will follow up with a more the contact information about the support account, which I'm blanking on the email address, and the other one is the a more detailed, specific timeline for when the publication option will be available to you, so you can complete this task that you're working on.
Yeah, this is Tracy. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to walk us through this. Like I said, I'm sure we'll have a second round of questions as we get into it another time, but I really appreciate you guys working out the distiller connection to facilitate our workflow. So I appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.